I think Sunak just has this kind of like preternatural ability to land on the least popular version of everything he wants to do, which will serve Labour very well in the run up to the election.
Good afternoon, John. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited to be talking about trains and Rishi Sunak, two of my favourite subjects. So glad to be here.
If anyone doesn't know Jonn Elledge, and you should, he is the king of transport. So if you've ever had a question about trains, rail, even some buses, you're the man to go to.
I wouldn't quite go that far, but I can bullshit about it quite compellingly, and have been making a living out of doing that for some years. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the announcement that the second leg of HS2 will be scrapped, and you're quite horrified by it.
This is really bad. Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning. The point of HS2 is not, as the name suggests, speed. It's actually capacity. Because as it stands, a lot of our high-speed trains run on the same tracks as our slow trains. And if you think about what that means in practice, it's basically that. So you don't let that happen by reducing the capacity on the line. You kind of you leave gaps in the schedule. The more high-speed trains you run on the line, the fewer local or regional services you can. So the point of a high-speed rail line was to kind of get the fast trains from London to the Midlands and the North out of the way, so you could run more of those other services. That's still going to happen in the southern bit of the line, the London to Birmingham bit. So that's probably good for passengers to like Watford and Milton Keynes or on the eastern side of Birmingham. But by stripping the northern arms off, it's no longer going to be happening on the other side of Birmingham and in the north. So that's immediately gone. The other really annoying thing about it is they've spent a fortune on the bit of HS2 they are building to placate NIMBYs, not just NIMBY voters, more NIMBY Tory MPs in places like Buckinghamshire, where they were really annoyed at the idea that some of their voters might sometimes have to look at a train. So they've put all that stuff in tunnels, which is why the project is now so much more expensive, and they can't afford to do the end bit. So we will still get some benefit out of what they're building, but it's going to be a fraction as useful as it was supposed to be.
So this isn't an ancient Woodland thing, because we got quite a lot of hate yesterday because I suggested to Ollie Dugmore that it wasn't a Woodland thing, it was a NIMBY thing.
It's a NIMBY thing. I mean, the Woodlands, the thing about I'm going to get the hate now. The thing about the ancient Woodland stuff is there is a huge amount of ancient woodland on this island because we used to be covered in trees. If you build any significant transport project, it's extremely it's scattered. The ancient woodland is scattered across the country, so you end up having to wriggle around it, or you have to take some of it out. That is true of any road or rail project ever. Actually, really not that many ancient trees were going to be sacrificed for HS2. It's about the same as would be sacrificed for the Lower Thames crossing, which would be a road link east of Dartford between Essex and Kent, which is about 10 miles long rather than a couple of 100 miles long. A lot of effort has been made with HS2 to make sure we're not destroying that ancient woodland. There are people, particularly in the Green Party, who do oppose it on that basis, but there are also people in the Green Party who oppose erecting solar panels or wind farms on that basis. I personally think this raises some questions about how green this bit of the Green Party actually is. It feels like they're more interested in protecting individual leaves than they are in a sort of more environmentally healthy policy for the country as a whole. But that's kind of a sort of useful fig leaf, which is a terrible pun I've stumbled into there.
Protect the fig leaves.
I think from Sunak's point of view, it's not even about NIMBYs really. My suspicion is it's a couple of things. One of which is clearly the man just does not like trains. He doesn't get it. Like he uses a private plane or a helicopter whenever he can. He's got America brain. They don't do trains in America. So he just doesn't see why this matters. Another thing is fiscal conservatism. This is a big investment. The price has rocketed, largely because of those changes I mentioned on the sort of Buckinghamshire leg, but nonetheless, the price has gone up a lot. So it is not crazy that a government that wanted to spend less money might want to keep it under review. But also, he wants to kind of redirect the money to a series of smaller, more immediate transport policies, which may genuinely win more votes. We'll be coming on to those in a minute, I'm sure. And also to create the headroom for some tax cuts before the election. So I think those are the motivations. It's not because Rishi Sunak secretly loves trees.
Mm-hmm. My simple reading of the new transport links is that, it's a way to... I tell you what, I'll let you tell me, because I already made my opinion clear and I've got a lot of backlash for it. What do you think all these new transport links announcements are about?
I think it's about... one of the reasons HS2 has been difficult is because It's a very long-term, very expensive project, which over a period of probably 20 years causes chaos, and the benefits for it don't appear for quite a while. That is politically quite a difficult thing to do. Although it's probably necessary for the country, well, I think it's definitely necessary, but I think you can make a strong case that it's necessary. In the short term, it's probably a net vote loser. I think the point of a lot of these more local transport things is they will be delivered more quickly. They are scattered across the country. I imagine a lot of these are in places that are where the Tories are particularly worried about retaining seats. And they're probably going to be, some of them at least, they're going to be vote winners rather than the immediate term vote losers.
Well, there was the Midlands Metro, right? And so he gave a particular shout out to Andy Street, who is a Conservative mayor, and he'd upset him yesterday.
Yes.
So it's about appeasement.
Street was pissed off about the cancellation of the Birmingham-Manchester leg of HS2. And also Andy Street is a particular, he came from business. He's not a sort of Tory in the sense of the guys who are taking over the party now, who are kind of quite on the culture war-y side of things. Andy Street is basically a moderate who just wants a sort of lovely capitalist economy kind of thing. So I think he thinks removing that leg of HS2 will be deeply impractical. Promising to extend the West Midlands Metro, which is a couple of tram lines that aren't that extensive in the sort of Birmingham Wolverhampton area, is presumably an attempt to kind of keep Andy Street on side.
Will it?
I don't know. So I didn't actually, forgive me, I forgot to check this, but I did hear whispers that Andy Street had been reported as threatening to quit the party if he didn't get his way. So he is the sort of person you probably don't want to lose at this point in the electoral cycle. My question about the West Midlands is, it's a major metropolitan area. It is crazy that an area of 2 million people does not have like a decent sort of public transport network in and of itself. We should definitely be building that. My questions are whether this is actually ever going to happen, because it's very easy to stand on a conference stage or issue a press release and say you're going to do these things. Often these projects are not necessarily these projects, but often projects of this sort have been announced by Conservative leaders and then never happened. Like another bit of the rail network that's been waiting for an upgrade for many years is Manchester Piccadilly Station needs 2 more platforms to enable more through services. Network Rail built what's called a chord, another tiny bit of rail link on the western side of Manchester called the Aldsall Curve, which enables more through trains to run through Manchester. Spent a small fortune doing that, but they didn't do the other half of the project, which would be these extra platforms at Manchester Piccadilly. So the Northern Rail Network hasn't got most of the benefits of that project. Those 2 platforms have been announced several times, yet they just haven't actually received Treasury funding, because it's quite easy for a Prime Minister to say, oh, we want to do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, the Treasury really likes not spending money if it can avoid doing it. I suspect a lot of the projects on this list would not happen even if we had another 10 years of Conservative government, and we're probably not going to get those. So it's a wish list. It's an attempt to win votes. I don't actually believe most of these things will happen anytime soon.
But the one thing that is going to happen, as we just read before we started this, is he is absolutely going to be cancelling a lot of the HS2.
Yeah. So to build a project on that scale, before you can even start building, you need to protect the route, which means sort of changing the planning system so that people can't build anything else on it. And you need to acquire the land. That's what's happened on the sort of northern arm of HS2 so far. The announcement today does say that they're going to undo that. They're going to start, they're looking to sell that land again. They're going to remove those protections. This does mean that even if a Labour government were to be elected in a year, 18 months' time, wanting to bring this back, which is by no means certain, even if that happened, it's possible that they're going to get in and find that it's no longer that easy to do it because these restrictions have been removed.
Right. But the land specifically, so he's now saying he's going to sell back the land that they've previously bought to put the tracks down on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, this is what they're saying.
It sounds insane.
It does kind of sound like, it's salting the earth, isn't it? It's kind of making it harder to undo this decision.
Yeah. Which
I do find a bit baffling. I think partly it's probably to show he's really serious about this. I also wonder if, again, it's the sort of fiscal conservative in him kicking in. It's like, well, we have these assets we don't need. Let's sell them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we've got a huge list of transport announcements today, and apparently these are all going to be funded by...
Yeah, definitely all going to be funded. Absolutely. No word of a lie.
Specifically through the £6 billion that he's going to save by cancelling
Which is not much. I mean, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say no if anyone out there is offering. But in terms of major national infrastructure spend, 6 billion is not that much at all. Like Crossrail, which is pretty transformative, but Crossrail cost 3 times that. So I am looking.
And we love that now.
I love it. I mean, I grew up on one of the branches of it. I've been waiting for that for literally decades. Romford on the tube map. I never thought I'd see the like. But 6 billion quid is not that much money for these kind of projects.
But it's interesting as well how quickly those transport links now become integral to everyone's journey, everyone's lives.
People bitch about these things beforehand. They hate the construction, they hate the disruption of it, they hate the fact it means delays to existing services, and then 3 days after they're up and running, you can't live without them. And that's the same every time. And I'm sure it would be the same with HS2 if they actually built it.
So what's going to happen now then? So you've got increased capacity going to Birmingham. Is it not going to create a sort of bottleneck effect? Are there not going to be a lot of people potentially going there and then not going to have the rail links to go elsewhere?
It's actually a bit, or was last time I looked anyway, it's a bit unclear what happens immediately north from, I think, east of Birmingham, where HS2 would have to link up with the existing West Coast main line. The plan would be for trains that currently use that line to divert onto HS2. So some of the commentary today is assuming that this will mean extra trains, and thus it's actually removing capacity from that line. I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be the same trains, they just go a different route. But it's not clear how they're going to connect the two together, and it's not clear whether it would actually save any time. In fact, I've seen some estimates that suggest that this could actually mean slightly slower journeys from Manchester to central London, which feels absurd, doesn't it? But yes,
it's not very high speed, is it?
It's not. Well, I mean, it would mean that you kind of go at high speed, a sort of slightly long way around between London and Birmingham, and then you trundle much more slowly across the sort of northern Midlands. But yeah, it's building the bit we are getting is good. It's just going to be a fraction as valuable as building the whole thing would be. And it does kind of make it look like all the people who've said it's a white elephant, they will now feel emboldened by this, because it probably wasn't worth spending, what is it, £22 billion for the benefits we're actually going to get out of this. It was worth spending that if we were going to get all the other benefits, but they've cancelled those bits. The original plan not even the original plan, the plan for HS2 as recently as 2020, the business case for it, I was looking at the map earlier, it's basically all sort of long distance rail services from London and anywhere from sort of north of Milton Keynes would divert onto the new track. So it's not just London and Birmingham and Manchester. It would also mean trains to Liverpool, and beyond that up through the Lake District to Glasgow. Also, there was once an eastern arm that was going to go through the East Midlands to Leeds, Newcastle, Edinburgh. All those long distance rail services would have diverted onto this one set of tracks, and it would have meant faster trains to London from all across the north of England and Scotland. All gone, because they're just not building it.
Sounds quite utopian.
Sounds great, doesn't it? I love trains. I don't know if you're getting that. I really like trains. Trains are good.
Do you think there's an element of this that's a little bit spiteful? Because, right, so we're expecting an election, right? And an election is imminent. He's making all these big announcements. He's going to, as you said, salt the earth so no one can actually continue doing HS2 if they actually wanted to. The next government wanted to pick it up again. They can't. Is it a little bit spiteful because you're basically making all of these announcements and then a potentially Labour government will have to pick up the pieces?
Potentially. I don't know how conscious that is. Because I think it feels to me like there is one person in this country who thinks the Tories can still win the next election, and it is Rishi Sunak. I think from all the briefing, it seems like he genuinely believes that the way of differentiating himself from Keir Starmer and showing what kind of politician he is to be the guy who will level with the electorate and say, sorry, but we can't actually afford to do that. I don't really see why this is a winning pitch to voters 13 years into a Conservative government to be saying, oh, after we've been in power this long, we can't do anything because we haven't got the money, vote Tory. It doesn't feel to me like an election-winning platform, but it's not the likes of me it's aimed at. So I don't know how spiteful it is. I think it is more that he genuinely does not understand the rail network or why it matters. And he seems quite pro-road. Like there's a lot of bypasses in here. So on the list, we've got, apparently they're funding the Shipley bypass, the Blythe Relief Road, which a very angry man in Northumberland a very angry man in Northumberland who occasionally pops up in my mentions is quite keen on. 70 other road schemes. There'll be resurfacing roads across the country. I think he has looked at figures which rightly show that actually far more people in this country drive regularly than take trains, and thinks that this is a vote winner. I'm just not sure it actually is, because I think a lot of people will be looking at that and think, well, why can't our government do anything anymore?
Is the argument there, though, that people are dependent on cars because there isn't any rail infrastructure?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of that, especially in urban areas. I mean, you know, we're recording in London, we live here. I can drive, I almost never do, because it's just not necessary, and it's nicer to get public transport and, you know, be able to have a pint or something.
That's the nice bit about it, right?
That is the best bit. But if you're, my father lived in Birmingham for many years, and I used to go and see him, and it was very, very difficult without a car, because even like only a couple of miles from the city centre, like the buses were so rubbish. There was no kind of train or anything, so you had to drive everywhere. And I think a lot of our major cities do kind of have that culture, which is quite American, in that that's true of most American cities. If you go to any city of a similar size in Europe, though, there'll be a tram network, there'll be a metro. So like one reason we are quite dependent on our cars in cities certainly is because we haven't built that other infrastructure. I mean, one of the other things on this list, which, sorry, I don't buy it. They're never going to do this, but it does say here, build the Leeds tram. Leeds, last time I looked, was the largest metropolitan area in Britain, sorry, the largest metropolitan area in Europe without any kind of transport network beyond buses or kind of rail services. It doesn't have a metro, it doesn't have a tram. It really needs something like a tram. It's a big student city. The first time the Leeds Supertram was cancelled, not planned, cancelled for the first time in 2005. That's how long this has been on the table. And every now and again, a prime minister or a chancellor stands up and says, oh, we're going to look at a tram network for Leeds. And it just doesn't happen. So I don't see any reason to believe it's going to happen this time either. I
was smiling a lot because I was really hoping that you would do the Leeds fact. I was thinking, how can I shoehorn this in so that he does the Leeds fact? Let's just reflect on the last couple of days about the announcement about HS2 and how confused and crazy it has all been. I mean, just yesterday, Lee Anderson, Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, was saying that no one wants a link between Bradford and Manchester. And now today, the Prime Minister is on the stage announcing a new link that will be very helpful to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, Lee Anderson is... Did you see today's Daily Star, by the way, has a story about Lee Anderson on the front. And if you look very carefully, there's a caption that simply reads, knob. Which is lovely. I mean, he's clearly just towing what he thinks is the party line, and the party line has changed quite a lot several times in the last 72 hours, just because they were trying to maintain that no decision had been made when everybody knew a decision had been made.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that really? Do you think earnestly that there had actually been a decision made? Do you not think? Because I mean, we could only speculate, but in my head, I don't think they did know what to do about all of it. I thought that perhaps he thought he was going to do this big piece on, you know, how the green loony left want to weaponise the car, and I want you back in your cars and rights for motors. And
yeah, that's a surprise that didn't come up, did it? No, I would have expected more on that. I wonder if that was the plan and they kind of backed away from it, because I don't think the response to the HS2 announcement has been what they imagined it would be, because it's not. Do you remember the way that Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto, every individual policy in it would poll well, but the package as a whole polled badly? Mm-hmm. And I think there's something similar going on here where, like, you know, HS2 is not actually a popular project. A lot of people think it's a white elephant. It costs a fortune. The price has gone up. It's massively disruptive. So I think he imagined that he would scrap it and people would be like, oh, thank you, Rishi, you've saved our city. And what's actually happened is people have looked at it and it's like, well, this is a shambles. Why can't this country build anything? Why can we just not achieve anything anymore? So my suspicion is he just hasn't got the reaction he was expecting, and that may have led to a last-minute wobble. I don't know.
He looked a bit wobbly.
I mean, he often does. He does seem to have kind of an amazing ability to kind of like come up with these issues that, you know, on paper, they do sound like they will create quite a helpful dividing line with Labour if you're a Tory leader, yet somehow he manages to do them in exactly the way that annoys the other side without winning him any of his natural support. Like I sort of felt this with the net zero stuff as well. Mm-hmm. where, like there is a massive cost of dealing with net zero coming down the tracks towards us. There is going to come a point at which probably those policies are going to be unpopular, which is a shame, because if we don't want the planet to burn, we sort of need them. But we're not at that point yet. At this point, environmental stuff polls incredibly well because people just hear, do you want to save the planet? They don't hear, do you want to save the planet? It'll cost you 10,000 quid. So I think Sunak just has this kind of like preternatural ability to land on the least popular version of everything he wants to do, which will serve Labour very well in the run up to the election.